Hello, I'm Jim Demmer with Clark County Close-Up. Thank you very much for meeting with us.
Thanks, Jim. Nice to be here.
Okay, Rick, let's start with some quick background information. When was the main jail built?
The main jail was built in 1984. It opened with 306 beds. Several years later, in the year 2000, the Jail Work Center was constructed and opened with 200 beds.
Okay, and what is the jail bed capacity today?
Jail bed capacity is 793 beds between the two facilities, but due to recent budget reductions, we have 120 of those beds closed. So there's 100 beds at the Jail Work Center, and the balance is at the main jail.
And just to orient people, so the main jail is in downtown Vancouver.
Correct.
And where's the Jail Work Center?
So the main jail is behind the courthouse because we're located there for the courts, and the Jail Work Center is out by the port, down there on the port property off by the river.
Okay, so you got to look to the future. How many beds do you anticipate needing over these next 20 years?
Well, that's a meaty question.
Okay.
So the jail, anticipating jail beds is a little bit difficult. The consultant group, DLR, who was a successful bidder for this report, did 3 estimates. The lowest number was just over 1,000, and the highest number was over 1,700 beds in the next 20 years. The biggest challenge with estimating jail beds and future needs is the changes in criminal code or legislation.
Sure.
The best example in the state of Washington was in 1984, the legislature implemented the Sentencing Reform Act, July 1st. The Sentencing Reform Act changed the length of stay convicted felons stayed on their crime and significantly increased local jail populations. No one could have anticipated that. So looking forward, it's difficult to say how many beds you're going to need, not knowing what's going to change. So to get the number of estimated beds, they did the three projections, and then we looked at what's called incarceration rate. Nationally, for the United States, historically, and through 2015, the incarceration rate, which is defined as the number of jail beds for 100,000 people living in a community, was 302. In the state of Washington, it's between 190 to the low 180s for 100,000 people. And Clark County, historically, has been 160 jail beds for 100,000 people. We took that number, combined it with the projections from DLR, took into account the criminal justice system's use of alternatives to incarceration, and came up with an estimate of 1,028 beds over the next 20 years for Clark County.
Okay. The other thing, I watched the work session, the most recent work session, and it was talking about, since the jail was built, how have corrections services changed?
Sure. So most people, when they think of a jail, they think of Alcatraz. Cells with bars. They have rows or tiers stacked up, what we call tiers. And that's what most people think of, and 50 years ago, that was a jail. 40 years ago, about when we were built, they had moved to what's called indirect supervision. There's a barrier of glass and steel and cement between the deputies and the inmate population. Because of the changes in inmate population and their needs, the mentally ill, the violent, the different types of offenders we get, corrections has moved to what's called direct supervision.
Okay.
What that means is that the deputy works inside the housing unit with the inmates. It provides a safer environment. It helps those with mental illness issues. And it provides a place for programs to come in under the supervision of corrections deputies. Those volunteers come in with their equipment and work with those who want to break the cycle of recidivism. That's how we've evolved.
Okay. So does the current jail fit that kind of model?
No, sir,
Okay.
It doesn't.
So it's the Alcatraz, more of the Alcatraz.
It's just past Alcatraz, but it's that steel, glass barrier between us and the inmate population.
Okay. So as we discussed, there was a recent work session where members of the Board of Counselors, discuss the findings of a jail study. You just mentioned who did the jail study?
The DLR group was the successful bidder.
Okay, and then what was the goal of the study?
Well, over the past several years, we've had a number of inmate deaths. In 2015, we had a number of smoke incidents in our HVAC system,
Okay.
which caused responses by the Vancouver Fire Department. On top of that, we have a 33-year-old building with a number of original equipment, mechanical pieces in it. And there was a number of people, including myself, who's concerned about what was the actual condition of our building. So the study was to find out what the actual physical plant condition of our building was. Could it be remodeled or expanded? And what was the feasibility of it? And then what were the costs?
And did it also include any of the other facilities, like the jail work center?
Yes, it did. We couldn't study one without the other.
Okay, all right. So what did the study say about the existing jail?
Well, let's start with the good points.
Okay.
We have an outstanding staff. We have cutting-edge programs. And the building itself, the architect and the engineers called the bones of the structure, and the envelope are in good shape.
That's good.
But that's where the good points stop.
Okay.
We are cramped. Our intake area is insufficient, both in just the physical size for our inmates coming in.
So this is with police cars.
Police cars coming in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Our detox area is inadequate. There's no assessment housing. Our property room is tiny. Moving upstairs to the main part of the jail, with those barriers, our line of sight to actually see the inmate population is difficult to supervise. It's crowded. And then overall, the physical plant is just too small. The bottom line of the report is we've just outgrown the building.
Okay. So at the work session, there were several options presented. I kind of like to we only have 15 minutes here, so I'd like to focus on the preferred option. We're going to have some visuals to show.
Sure.
So with the preferred options, what are we talking about? How would the jail campus change?
Well, first of all, let's start with the main building, the current existing main jail. Because of its compact design, if we just remodeled it, we would not net nearly the number of beds as estimated over the next 20 years. But it is in good shape for reuse or repurposing. So we looked at that for courtrooms, the sheriff's office, support units, and different things like that for the main building. And ironically, DLR didn't know it, but the old county jail was located in the 5th floor of the courthouse, which when we built the current jail was repurposed into courtrooms.
Oh, interesting.
Clark County has this history of repurposing its buildings instead of just knocking down and starting over. Looking at that map or the preferred master plan, and you go down below or to the south, those are the housing units that have the main portion of the beds and the just overall housing for inmate population. As you move north or up on the map, there's the ATR, Alternatives Transfer and Release.
Okay, yeah, give us a little bit.
Sure.
What's that?
That's where the Jail Work Center would be relocated back to the main campus with all of its work programs.
Okay.
Work release, alternatives to incarceration, inmates working to repay society by preparing the meals, the laundry, the cleaning services, and things like that. Also in the ATR would be our transitional housing for those who are homeless and want to break the cycle, mental health, and different ways that we can refer people to existing programs that are already in Vancouver, and that we just need to make sure they know where they're at and they get transportation to those programs. Without that key component, we can flood those shelters and those services in West Vancouver with just one day of our releases. So we had to build that in there to make sure that we didn't impact people who are not in the criminal justice system.
Right, and we're trying to get away from jailing people who have mental health
Correct.
issues and get them the services they need. And
These
homeless,
are alternatives.
drunk. Okay.
We want to have jail beds for those who victimize our community, not for people who have some challenges that are low-risk offenders. But
you want to support those people.
Absolutely.
Right,
so we can make sure that we get through those services and make sure people have the tools to break the cycle of recidivism.
Okay.
The last part of that before
sure.
There's one more piece. Then off to the left on the map or to the west is a parking area, because we'll have public parking in the middle of the whole thing, and then our evidence storehouse. What that design does, in the middle, there's a secured area, service area. In 20 years, because of the design and because of the anticipation of beds and because our direction was to look out 40 years, we can build inside that secure perimeter and add beds. Nobody wants to site a jail. Nobody wants a jail in their backyard. So we've taken the step to make sure that Clark County has a place to site additional beds on the campus in the footprint for the next 40 years.
Oh, wow. And one thing for anyone who's gone to the courthouse, served as a juror, parking is at a premium there.
Correct.
So this would be a potential parking solution.
Correct.
Also for
to help alleviate the parking issues. That's correct.
Okay. And then to clarify now, how many inmates could be housed with this option?
1,028 with an expansion in 20 years for additional beds after that, depending on what changes happen in criminal justice and legislative changes.
Okay. And we kind of talked briefly, so how would this benefit with new services?
Sure.
Safety, things like that?
Sure. It gives a modern and safe work environment for our staff. Mm-hmm. It gives an expanded and opened intake area for our police officers. We want to get them in, we want to get their new arrests processed, and we want them back out on the street as soon as possible so they can continue to provide public safety.
Because you can talk quite a long time
about you can come downtown in our current facility right now on Saturday night. You can see the line of patrol cars out our back door.
And when that's there, that means they're not on the street.
Out on the street, and we want our police officers out on the street. Okay. Our public wants that. Mm-hmm. This design allows for alternatives and assessment. So those coming in, assessment housing on the first floor. All this is on the first floor with our medical unit and assessment housing. So those who need to be diverted, those who can be released in the first 72 hours to other services while being held accountable, we'll still make sure they get to court, but we can get those people diverted over to those other services that we talked about. Okay. So we've got a safer work environment, we get our police officers out on the street, and we take care of the people coming into the facility.
Okay. How would this also affect operations? I would assume you would design it in a way to smooth things out.
In the housing units themselves, one of the we talked about earlier with the report, we're cramped and we're in direct supervision. So all these community volunteers that want to come in, these free programs that want to help people, we've only got a very small area of our jail we can do it. If I have the deputies in supervising these folks in there, the volunteers can come into these housing units, where it's safe. And just remember, direct supervision isn't for everybody. We have some very, very violent people housed in our facility. Indirect supervision for a certain segment of our population is necessary. And then they get to choose. They can either stay in the housing unit and be transferred to an institution, or they can learn to follow society's our rules and society's rules and work their way up to a less restrictive housing. So we have a place for our volunteers. We have better supervision for our inmates. Our staff has a quieter, cleaner environment that's safer. And we add back to our police officers by getting them back out on the street faster.
Okay, now the big question, what's the cost range of the preferred alternative?
The preferred alternative came in between $268 million and $284 million, assuming that we start in 2018. Otherwise, the price goes up as materials go up.
What are the finance options?
So the finance options, and those lie with the Board of County Councilors. They're the ones looking at that right now. And we were told and expected a project of this size would need to go before the voters.
When do you anticipate this would go before the voters?
Well, we have been pushing for 2017, this November.
Oh, wow.
But there's a lot of work to do. We need to make sure that the information is out there for voters to make an informed decision. Failing to make November of 2017, we'll be out for the earliest ballot possible in 2018.
Okay. What feedback did you receive from the county councilors about your?
Well, the county councilors have been sympathetic. Mm-hmm. They've been supportive. And they have really held mine and the sheriff's feet to the fire with questions and requests for information. They take this seriously. They know that there's a need, a public safety need. And they have been working on those financing questions as we work through the operational questions and get the designs ready. So we really do appreciate their willingness to have the discussion and then continue the discussion as we move forward.
And so roughly what are some of the next steps?
Well, the financing is the big question. They're working on the financing as the sheriff and I are meeting with other elected officials, our criminal justice partners, and members of the community to answer their questions. We're getting a lot of questions. We're getting a lot of requests for presentations,
Sure.
and we expect that to continue through the summer.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I appreciate your time.
Sure.
Please remind folks out there that if they want more information, there's a phone number that you'll be putting on the screen at the end.
Sure, right. Well, yeah, so if they do want more information, I looked on the county counselor's page, the grid.
Correct.
On the main website, clark.wa.gov.
Correct.
There is you can click on there and see the actual study.
Correct.
So if people want to get in depth on that. And then a number they can call.
So you can call the sheriff's office at 397-2211 and ask for jail administration, and you'll end up with one of the command team or myself.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm sure we'll be talking more about this very exciting project.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me.